Hello, I'm Ian and I'm Somerset News Network. This is the video and what I'm calling The Alliance. We were hoping that reform was going to be the hope we needed. But we've seen the way that UKIP went, that Brexit went, and now reform is heading down the same road. Throwing good people out, rumours, innuendos, all sorts of things. It's not the way to treat people, not the way to run a party to get my vote. But we've got loads of individuals, a lot of left UKIP and reform. You've got Wolf, you've got Habib, you've got Broom, all good guys, all saying what we think. A bit more articulate than me, I'd agree. But they're common sense, centre-right thinking. And there's a lot of us. Now what they're trying to do is they're trying to use this free speech thing they call now. And they've put Ofcom in to monitor the internet. And they're going to police the internet. They're going to police social media. Facebook, TikTok, WhatsApp, YouTube. I expect they'll even try and do it on Rumble. And what they'll use is not to stand up for freedom of speech. What they will do is use the hate crime law, which is normally a non-crime hate incident. And this is on the first level, it's done to harass you. Because you don't want to be in trouble with the police. You don't want the police at your door. You used to respect the police. They catch criminals. They make the streets safer. But now they're after you for saying what you think, for common sense thinking most of the time. You can tell the truth and find a policeman at your door. I might find a policeman at the door for this video. And they say it's a non-crime hate incident. Now they say, oh, well, they'll only let you off with a caution. Well, how can you have a caution for a non-crime? I don't understand the logic in that. And how can you have a non-crime hate incident? It either is a crime or isn't a crime. Now, if they think that it's more serious, what they do is they say it's malicious communications, which is also another act that's been brought in. I think that was done in the 80s. You know, that's what happened to me. I made a comment, a one-line comment on Facebook. Had a 4-month police investigation. To start with, it was a non-crime hate incident. Then it was hate crime. Then it turned into, oh, we're looking at arresting you for malicious communications. And that's what's going to happen to all of us. Something to me, it's going to happen to you. They want to shut down common sense free speech. That's what I keep talking about. The freedom of speech and debate, Article 9, Bill of Rights. It's there. It's used. They say, oh, MPs have got the right of free speech. Yeah, that's right. They have under the Bill of Rights. Or they say, oh, it's only for MPs. Yeah, but when a newspaper says something out of line and you disagree with it, they go straight to the High Court because of the Bill of Rights, Article 9. What we need is an alliance of all of us. And we've got to stand up for free speech and what free speech is. And then tagged to this, what we want is a list of what we can agree with. I thought it was a memorandum of understanding. So that if anybody wanted to stand as, say, UKIP or even reform if they want to come back in on this, and if we allow it. There's all these little individual parties, and we all want free speech, and we all want to be able to talk. So the first fundamental right, like the First Amendment of the United States, is free speech. And what you use is Article 9 of the Bill of Rights. That's the first article that we can all agree with. Freedom of speech and debate under the law. If we say something wrong, we'll have to go to the High Court and explain ourselves. But as most of them, we just say something flippant and we don't really mean it and we've said it wrong, we should then be able to put a retraction in. I don't think that Ofcom has the right to do it. It would be the individual or the organisation that says you've said something wrong about them. Now, we don't normally lie. We're called common sense. That's what it's about. The alliance should be about common sense. What's the right thing to do? There's an old Act of Parliament, and it says justice and right for all. It's in our Constitution. Rights and liberties are the subject. That could be our second thing on the list. Next thing we want is secure borders. Stop the boat people. I think most of us can agree with that. We want less government, lower taxes. I think most of us will agree with that. I'm not saying to get rid of taxes, but we want lower taxes and we want less government. Now, I think the government spends too much money, got too many people, and it needs, thinning out a little bit. Thinning out a lot. So yeah, we can agree with that. Now, we want law and order. We got a police force that cannot cope with what it's got. And that's the third one on the list. Or is it the fourth one now? I can't remember. But somebody will be writing this down. We want law and order. We want to be able to walk the streets safely. That was another one in our Constitution. What we need, my idea, you might call them special constables, you might call them a militia. They don't need to be armed. But they could be the eyes and ears of the police. And they would help investigate crimes. I would like to call it a militia, but you could call it special constables. Then they'd have a warrant card. And then they could arrest people. We can solve crime. We know how to do this. And then that brings us on to the grooming gangs. I think you ought to listen to this. This is Glenn Beck and our shortest ever serving Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
For things that they have posted on social media. That is true.
When we see, videos, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, we see people being arrested in England for things that we know are human rights here in America, even though we were really close to losing it ourselves. I'm glad to hear you say this, and if you could expand a little bit, because I don't think I'm the only American that feels this way. I watch what's happening over in Europe and in England, and I just can't get past, and maybe it's the American in me, but I don't think it is. People are not going to stand here, but you can't let their children be raped and killed and then ignore it, cover it up, and then go and use the state against that person, that parent, or that person in the community that's like, hey, guys, I'm fine with a lot of stuff, but not killing my children or raping our children. I'm glad to hear you say that the average person, would you believe it's the average person in England? It knows what's going on and is like, I don't know what to do yet. But
people are horrified, absolutely horrified by what has happened. And we are talking about tens of thousands of girls being raped as young as 11 and 12 and being tortured, because that's what happened, and some of them being killed. This is what's been going on. And
wasn't Starmer somehow or another part of that cover-up?
He was the director of public prosecutions, and what has happened has just not been investigated. And what we know that there was collusion with the police. So we've now seen police officers being arrested for being involved in the crimes themselves. We know that local councils and local councillors covered it up. And we know that Labour politicians, in particular, turned a blind eye. And they're still refusing to have a national inquiry into what has happened. And I understand that this is still going on, that these crimes are still being perpetrated. In fact, some of the original people that are jailed have now been let out of prison. So we are in a situation in Britain where people are being punished more harshly for posting things on Facebook and Twitter than they are for committing crimes. And it's an outrage. And what's been happening is every few years, the issue emerges and a documentary is produced and everybody says this is awful and it's terrible. But what happens is the mainstream media, the BBC, just don't report on it very much. So there's a channel called GB News that's done a pretty good job of raising the issue and pushing it. And Elon Musk, who I see as the leader of the opposition in Britain, to be honest, he's the one taking on Keir Starmer more than anybody who's actually in Britain at the moment. But the problem is, the way the media operate is they then have wall-to-wall coverage on other issues.
Right.
So when this, some of the horrors of what had been done to these girls were coming out in the media, the BBC reported on spat with Elon Musk. So they weren't talking about what happened to the victims. They were talking about a spat with Elon Musk. And the number one story was the LA fires. Now, of course, we all care about the LA fires, but there's a deliberate attempt to push and suppress things down the news agenda. So it's not like they don't ever talk about it. It's just suppressed. And so people move on and they think about something else. And that is what has happened.
Is there a real legitimate or not legitimate, capable movement at all being formed to give freedom of speech back online? Because if you don't have that, I mean, we were close to losing it, but we never got anywhere close to where you guys are now.
Well, the thing is, though, the Labour government have tried, but what they're unable to do is regulate the internet, and they're unable to cancel X. So they're not going to succeed. They're not going to succeed, and I know J.D. Vance and President Trump will take a very dim view of the UK if that happens. So, that is our strength in the battle against the censors. And for those people who are engaged on X, they can see what's actually happening. And what we want to do with our new free speech network is add more content to that, give people more of a voice, and develop the type of ecosystem you've got in the US with, your show, with organizations like, with Steve Bannon, with the whole, Joe Rogan. That is the type of media ecosystem that Europe needs. And this censorship isn't just going on in Britain.
Oh, I know.
I mean, you can be arrested in Germany for hurting words.
I know.
You know, the French are trying to close down particular TV channels. This is a project which is supported by the elites that we've just been talking about. And if you remember, Hillary Clinton was challenging the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is not just.
I know.
And by the way, USAID was funding the BBC.
I know.
And it was funding the Tony Blair Institute.
No, we're just doing charity. That's all that organization is.
This is not a. This is something the global left.
Liz Truss is saying what we all know. She's been in it. She knows it. I think she's got the right idea. She's talking about alliance of the free press, of YouTubers, people on Rumble, people on X or wherever. She wants a group of free journalists, and I think that's a good thing. But she's also they're also talking about the grooming gangs. Can't talk about that. Why not? Tommy's already been put in prison for it. Yes. Put in prison for highlighting girls that are being raped. Get that? Do you see what's happening? And we stand back and say nothing? Well, I'm saying something. Looking after kids is one of the most fundamental important things that now, well, I would say a father, but now a grandfather would do, is looking after children. And if we can't look after children, this country is going to hell in a handcart. It really is. And I've said it before. Those that don't do anything and know it, Mr. Starmer, should be as accountable for the crimes as the people that do it. Now, I'm not going to blame all police officers, because they got sergeants and inspectors that tell them what to do. But you've also got on top of that now the Crown Prosecution Service. And the Crown Prosecution Service says, oh, we can't go to court because the girl won't be believed. Because the average person on the street wouldn't believe the depravity of these grooming gangs and what they do. You know, if you knew what was going on, you'd be standing with us and up in arms. Liz Truss knows it. And at least she's speaking out. But why has she had to go over to the United States and talk to Glenn Beck about what's happening here? Because no way would the BBC ever took this interview. Or Channel 4. Oh, they might do something really late at night, about 11 or 12 o'clock when nobody's watching. What I found with stories on the BBC, they know they've got to do a story, and they know they've got to report on it, but they reported it on it with the least a number of viewers, or listeners if it's the radio. I used to have Radio 5 on most of the day in the workshop. And I found that the most and the best stories were at 2:30. That's when the least number of people were listening to Radio 5. With a story, you say a story's got legs, and it's got to meet critical mass before something happens. So you put a story out and only a few people see it. Like videos. Most of my videos get a dozen people if I'm lucky. And then I've been talking about Rupert Lowe and I'm getting 1,000, 2,000, in some cases 3,000 views. That's viral as far as I'm concerned. But other stations, like 2CTV, he's got over 750,000 subscribers now. And that's what we need. We need the good guys, not me. We need the good guys, the professionals, to do the best job they can, and we should support them. Now, this alliance, I'm talking about this alliance, is what we want. Talking about keeping our streets safe, we're talking about freedom of speech. Freedom of speech has got to come first. Securing our borders, making the street safe. Then you've got crime itself. Stealing, theft, car crime, and all the rest of it. We want lower taxes. I think we can all agree with that. We need to know how many people, they used to call it swinging the lead. You know, getting something for nothing. Working on the never never. You know, social security. Now we've got to thin that out. People that shouldn't be getting it, shouldn't be getting it. Now, I'm now in a wheelchair because I can't walk very well because I have arthritis in both hips and it's slowly getting worse. I walk as much as I can. I got a Zimmer frame at home and I get PIP with PIP. But I could lose that because my score isn't enough. Yet somebody who's, they say, mentally injured, mentally deranged, you know, got mental problems, you know, depression, he's going to get it because he gets a higher score than me. That ain't right. The guy that hasn't got a job, that can't job because he's worried because he hasn't got a job and it's calling him mental anguish, should get a job, then the mental anguish would go. They need counselling, they don't need money. You know, some people are mentally and do need help. We've got to admit that. But we can't go wasting money. Now we can all agree on this. And we can add to the list as time goes on. What I would like to see with this alliance is the independent social media. You've got Tusi, you've got the Lotus Eaters, you've got Lawrence Fox, you know, even Tommy Robinson. You know, Tommy Robinson is one that's highlighted all the grooming gangs. And, you know, he's got to be brought into the fold. He's got a lot of followers, mind. And they think like we do. Common sense. And doing what's right. There's an Act of Parliament. Oh, I'm not going on about that. We should not deny or defer justice or right. That's in an old Act of Parliament, which is part of our Constitution. And we are denying it. We are denying people's rights for having the right of free speech, and we're denying justice because we won't stop the grooming gangs. Now we've got to get together. We've got to say, hang on a minute, this has got to stop and we've got to do something about it. And I think we should all form an alliance, all join together, and call it the Alliance. The Alliance of Common Sense. If Reform want to come in later, we will have to see. Because at the moment I don't trust them. But we have to do something. We've tried the Conservatives, and they were more Labour than Labour. We've tried Labour, and they're more Labour than Labour again. They're Marxists now. You know, So we can't trust the Tories, we can't trust Labour. There's questions over reform. So we're going to have to do this for ourselves and give the people, the electorate, an alternative of common sense policies. And if they want, they can be UKIP. And in the literature, they can be UKIP, part of the alliance. They can be whatever name they like. They can be an independent and be part of the alliance. That's the way it would work. But what you need is a conference. You need everybody in a conference and to come up with this memorandum of understanding. That's what I'm calling it. It may have a different name. These people are cleverer than me. They've been to university and college. You know, they speak better than me. They're better at PR than me. I'm just an ordinary guy saying what I think. And if you agree me, let's join the alliance. Everybody. I'd like to see Habib, Brune, Lawrence Fox, Toosey, Tommy Robinson, all join together. And there's loads of other individuals that we like. The Silver Fox, I like him. You know, and then we can spread out. You know, we know that net zero is a big load of crap. It's a total lie. EVs aren't going to work. We got McMaster. He's brilliant on it. He might not be political, but he could be our EV advisor. He's had an EV for 4 years. He's lost £100,000 in 4 years on a car. This is what we've got to do. And what we find is, now I would say I was centre right, if you wanted to pigeonhole me. But what I'm finding is my socialist friends who voted Labour are saying, I'm not going to vote Labour again. I can't vote for Starmer. And they've been Labour all their lives. And they're agreeing with us now that things are wrong and they can see what's wrong. So if we can get an alliance of the centre-left and centre-right, of right-thinking, ordinary people, we can win an election. Anyway, Ian, I've said enough. This is a long one. I didn't want it to be as long as this, but things just keep going on in my head. I suppose you can see the cogs working. Anyway, this is Ian, Somerset News Network. Bye-bye.